Okie dokie. Right, so I'm just hoping this is going to work. If I disappear, you won't be able to tell me, I've just realised, because I'm only on the one device now, I think. But anyway, we'll see how it goes.
I've got my WhatsApp here, if you know my phone number.
Right, okay. But I should be able to log straight in on my my laptop anyway. So good. Hello everybody, and it's very nice to it's actually quite terrifying to know that there are so many of you from so many different places. I think perhaps if Lois just tells me there's about 10 people from down the road, it might be less nerve-wracking. But anyway, let's get started. So today we're going to look at doing a picture of a river, and the reference photo that I'm using, it's for a place in Devon. For those of you who know Dartmoor, it's at Dartmead, which is a place where I go to that always really reminds me of the watermill. So just to show you quickly, these are some of the photos that I took while I was at the watermill, you know, of the river with the rocks in, and look, the sun's shining, which I have to say doesn't happen very often around here. But I couldn't really use these as reference because the best ones I've got are portrait rather than landscape. So I went back to my local area, and when I was at Dartmead with my lovely friend Nell one day, I realised that this is actually a great place to use as reference. So I've now got, I'm working from, actually the reference that I've got is on my iPad because it's much better quality than my print. The colour is much nicer. In fact, I'll show it to you. Can you see what I mean? It's got depth, it's got light, it's got sparkle. But I still find it helps me to print it out as well. And I just wanted to show you these because what I do is I print out two. I've got this one, which kind of gives me the depth and the drama. But as you can see, the colour's quite dead. And I've got this one, which is much lighter. And I adjusted it in Photoshop, but I needed to do this because I needed to see the definition of the rocks, because when you print something out and you lose all the shadows, when the shadows go really black, then you can't see the structure. And those of you who know me know that I do like a bit of structure. It's very important to me. So I've kind of got lots of reference, but I wanted to show you all that because that's the way I work. And of course, because I took the photo, it's still in my head. So I haven't just got this, I've got that kind of visual recollection, the memory, and also I've sat at this river and sketched. And one of the things I love about it is the way the water ripples around the rocks. It's the way the water's see-through. You get this beautiful bluey light, but also it's that rippling constant motion. And there's something lovely about sitting sketching like at the watermill, because you get the noise as well. You hear the water moving, and that, to me, someone who just loves a bit of a dancing mark, that kind of helps me with my mark making. And a lot of what I'm going to be looking at today is mark making, because we've got different areas. It's quite a complicated picture in a way, but we've got different areas that we can kind of use different types of mark making. So it's a handy one in that sense. So quickly, just to talk about the composition, I've slightly changed it from the picture, because on the picture the trees were very much in the middle, so I've sort of shifted them over so that we get a little bit of things not being too repetitive, because otherwise we'd have had three kind of defined areas. And I'm also really, get my reference back here, I'm really in love with the fact that we've got this beautiful area of light up here, and it actually continues over the back there where there's just the field, a bit of a meadow. So I feel like this, I want, there's also curves that come round, and I want to take the viewer of this picture on a journey, sort of round the curves, following the path of the light. And then I want you to feel that you want to go round that corner. So I get quite carried away with my stories. I think that's what, I want people to feel like they're there, and I want them to feel like they're on a journey. So that's the composition. That's the thoughts that have gone behind the composition. And now let's just have a look at the colour choices, because as I said in my blurb that I sent out, the PDF, I'm basing most of my colours, nearly all of them, on this new pastel school set of pastels. Now, as I always say, you don't have to have this set of pastels, but just make sure what you're using, you do have your beautiful lights, your strong darks, and you're going to use your strong darks on this one, some bright primaries which will lift it and also give you the ability to mix, but also some lovely kind of neutral ones that work really well with kind of the landscape of the soil and the rocks and all of that sort of thing. So I have to say it's a bit sad, but my box looks like this, which actually it's not too bad because I've replaced some of them, but they end up getting worn down to these tiny little sticks. But I keep these because they're great for detail. So I've got those. I have to confess, I have introduced a turquoise, which I may not have mentioned earlier on, but these things happen. Things evolve. And I've done a little palette to kind of get a feel, and I'll try to remember to talk you through this, but these are sort of the background colours that I used. And what I've done here is I've just hatched them together to see how they mix and blend. And then as I've come forward and the trees get richer, I've used these. And then these are sort of mainly for the rocks and then more of the water here. But what I've also tried to do is blend these or kind of dot these around the picture as I go, because I don't want just to have like green trees, that would be good, wouldn't it? I don't want to have just green trees, brown rocks, blue water. There's a lot of colour reflecting going on. So last of all on the materials, the board I'm using is I've painted Colourfix Primer Rose Grey colour onto some mount card, but you really don't have to use that. It's just a surface that I like, and I have done this same piece on some grey papers. I think somebody asked me today whether it was okay to work on a darker colour paper. It's okay, yeah, it's fine. There isn't a right and a wrong at all, but you just might find on the if you're working on a darker surface that when we do the lights in the background, you have to just press a bit harder and use that a bit more, whereas your dark browny colour that you had will be beautiful under the river and the water. So it's just swings and roundabouts, but if you have a problem with that, then you can ask me on the chat. So I've drawn it out with charcoal. I don't normally draw them out this much, but when I'm working on my own in my studio or when I'm working from life, but just because I need to get it right today, I saved time by drawing it out. So let's quickly get started, and I'm going to try and remember to put my colours up here that I'm going to use, but I usually get so carried away I forget about that. So I'm going to start off by putting some of the sky colours in. And I don't always start at the top and work down, but with I often do with the landscape actually, partly because I like to get my distance in. And this one is very much about having the hazy distance. The things I really love about it are the sunlight, but also that lovely hazy feel to the distance. So I'm putting it on now and I'm smudging it. And I have to say, I try not to smudge it too much with the ends of my fingers, because you can see I have got plaster on my finger. I've already worn the end off my finger this week. So I'm going to try to be a bit kinder to myself and use this part of my hand. I'm not going to smudge all of it. I'm smudging this because, like I said, I want it to die back into the distance. And I'm going to use a bit more of a creamy. This is a kind of, so I've got a blue, a light blue, kind of mid blue, a light blue. This is a very pale greeny blue. Very, very pale. See, that's working okay. And I don't know whether you're noticing that as well as putting it on and smudging it, I'm also, where I've got some bits where my trees are going to go, I'm putting it on and then I'm just leaving it. So I'm holding the pastel, like they're half sticks. If I had whole sticks, a set of whole sticks, I'd have broken them in half anyway. And I'm holding it in the middle and I'm just kind of making marks to lay it, to just layer a kind of coating on. But then as I put other coats on, this is a kind of quite a bright green, because there's quite a lot of sunshine in this distance. And I want to build the feeling of these trees up with lots of layers of different colours. So let's just get a little bit of a bit more, and a bit of a, just trying to find my colours, because the light's different in here to when I was in my studio, so I'm just making sure things work. So that was the brighter one. This is a lovely colour. It's a kind of like a kind of Air Force blue colour, I think of it as. And again, I'm putting my marks on in a similar sort of way, very sort of gently, not putting a lot of pressure on. And as I do this, I'm looking at the trees in the distance, the far distance, and also these trees that are sort of the big clump in the middle. So the ones that are going further back, I'm just going to give them a bit more of a little bit of a smudge to knock them back. But I'm going to work quite quickly now, because I want to get quite a few layers on, so that I can then start to kind of blend them.
Will you stop at any point, Rebecca, for people to catch up, just to check?
Yes, I will. Does anybody want to ask anything already?
No, someone just wanted to know whether you were going to stop to pause at any moment. That was all. Not
Okay.
now, but you know.
Yes, I will pause. I will.
Okay. Okay. Just checking.
Yeah. So again, I'm using that same whatever it's called, Air Forcey blue colour, and I'm starting to put a little bit more under the trees here. But the thing about this clump of trees is, on this it just looks very flat. It just looks like a green clump. But actually on my iPad, what I can see is that the colours are more saturated and intense round here, and they fade away a bit as you get round here and down here. So I'm going to, again, not press too hard, not put too much on. I'm trying to put them back in the box so I don't lose them, which is not the way normally I work, in a bit of a frenzy. But again, when I'm doing demos, I have to be a little bit more controlled over it, because you know how annoying it is when you lose the colour. And you'll also find, as you lay one colour over another, that it picks up on the pastel, the colour. So what I do is have a piece of tissue handy, and just keep cleaning them as I go along. Just keep giving them a bit of a wipe. So this is a gently building it up, building up my layers, looking for the different colours that are in it, and also looking for the way the trees kind of, you get like there's a tree coming in here that's sort of coming over the top of the one behind, and it's a lovely kind of gentle way of working, quite calm and patient for me, it has to be said. And if I haven't got the right colour that I really want, then I'm just going to have to put on the colours that I've got and then blend them together a little bit. I think, is that you I can hear, Lois, or is it somebody else who's not muted?
It wasn't me, so it might be some art. I'll just mute one rogue person. I won't name names.
I can hear somebody moving their pastels around. I thought it would be unlikely to be Lois, who's
no,
actually...
not me. I don't have a pastel near me, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've also got a pink here that I'm bringing in. Where was my lighter green? So I've got a lighter green there, and I've got a pink as well. because there's actually, one of the reasons I've started the picture on this kind of pink colour is because there's a lot of it. Maybe it's because in Devon the soil is red clay, but there really is a lot of pink kind of to be seen. So that's just kind of, that to me is quite nice for the background. And I'm just going to put a little bit more of my my creamy white colour in it as well, which I don't think I've used until now. So this is a colour I missed out. There's a little bit of light there. No, this is a lovely, this cream is in the pastel set that I'm using, and it's a much nicer colour to use than white, because as my lovely friend Nell says, it's got sunshine in it, and that's exactly what we're trying to convey here. We're trying to convey that little bit of sunshine. So I'm just going to bring my sky a little bit behind the trees here. You'll notice that my drawing is already disappearing, so I'm going to have to hurry up and sort those trees out in a minute before they actually disappear completely. And I'm just going to put a little bit of those light greens in on the field in the distance here. So what I'm trying to do is just build up a lovely light glow in the distance, which hopefully is working. And I'm just giving my cream a little bit of a clean, and I'm just going to introduce a little bit more of the brighter, some of the brighter green for the trees over here. And again, I'm kind of working very loosely, very sort of openly. I'm still letting the paper show through. I'm just going to put, I've got a darker green. I'm sorry, I'm still forgetting to put these colours on. So that was the kind of like a rich olivey green, and then I've got a really dark green here, because there's some really nice areas of shadow in this little clump of trees, and those areas of shadow are going to be a fantastic foil to make the lighter areas look light. So before I go any further, I now need to really establish these tree trunks. So I'm actually going to use, I'm not going to use brown, I'm going to use this dark green. And I'm going to try to draw them by looking at the shadows and the highlights. And I'm starting to, let me just get a piece of paper to show you the way I'm making the marks. So, terrible noise going on. So the way I'm making the marks, I've been doing this sort of thing where I put it on and I don't smudge it. I've also been putting it on and smudging it. So the don't smudge it thing, you get that kind of thing happening. If you put the colour on and smudge it, you get a different feel to it. But now, as I'm doing the trunks of the trees, I'm again holding the pastel sort of in the middle, but I'm exploiting that edge of it, and it doesn't have to be a sharp edge, it can be the round edge, but by twisting and turning it and varying my pressure, I can start to get the feeling of trunks, hopefully. So coming back to this, I'm not trying to draw it exactly, I'm trying to convey that kind of feeling of twisting trees. Because I think with landscapes, if you try to draw every leaf, if you try to draw every twig, you're going to end up with something that does, well, for me, I end up with something that doesn't have any life in it. And to me, the life in this is that the feeling and the twistedness and the kind of the changes of direction. That's what gives it a bit of life. And there's also that feeling that they're all kind of coming from here and coming outwards. So as I do the ones that are a bit thinner, I'm using my pastel on its sort of more on its end, because I want to get a lighter mark to it. So the business of the weight that you put on is absolutely crucial. So here, where I've got the really fine bits, I'm kind of just letting it graze the surface. I'm not even kind of holding it. I'm letting it just sort of rest against my hand. And I cannot emphasize, if you know me, you've heard me say this till the cows come home, I cannot emphasize enough that practicing the pressure that you put on, how important it is to get some life and some energy into your picture. I'm just going to add a little bit of the darker green in between as well. And yeah, because I want to get a bit of talking to myself now, you can tell. Because this light and dark business, it's all about balance, isn't it? And I've just got to make sure that before I put the lights on these trunks, I've got enough dark going on behind it. Because I get very excited about putting the lights on the trunks, because it's really good fun. And as I put more kind of leafiness on now, it's a little bit of a smudge bit there. As I put more of this leafiness on now, can you see how I'm just pressing a little bit harder? Because I want it to be a little bit fuller. I'm just going to do a little bit more of that sort of feeling of it. I want it to kind of feel as if it's coming down the bank a bit. So we've got a bit of a bank, and we've got a bit of the trees, because what we do have around here is we have hedges planted on banks. So there's often a bank there, and then some really twisted roots. So now I want to put some of the light on the side of the trunks, and I'm coming back to this light green I used here. And I'm not necessarily, I could have used my cream for this, but I actually quite like the fact that I don't know whether you notice, if you're under trees and the sun's out and you've got shadows, the shadows they're really green. You get a lot of green light. It's almost like being underwater, I think, anyway, when I'm in sort of under trees in sunlight. So I just want to get a bit of that feeling of it all being very kind of green and warm. Put a little bit of cream in as well. And I'm also going to use this cream to put some more, there's some sort of branches over here, just kind of coming down over the darkness. And before I stop and have a quick pause, I'm just going to put some little brighter bits in as well. And I've got another green here that's quite a dangerous green, I regard this as, because it's the sort of green that if you use it too much, it can look really unnatural. So I think it's okay. There's a really sort of lovely, luscious bit of growth there that I'll just give a little bit of a zhuzh with that. But I'm going to be a little bit careful about how much I use it, because it can totally dominate. But it's nice as a sort of bit of an undercolour. So I'll just come in with a bit of my. Can't quite see what that looks like for you guys. So a lot of this is just really kind of twiddly marks. That's a technical term, obviously. But what I'm trying to do is get that kind of the dark, and then the kind of random bits of light catching on leaves and things. And then before I stop for a pause, so if you've got any questions, get them ready. I'm just going to now come over here and put in what I think is really, really important, which is the light on the rocks. So before I kind of make any more judgments about lights and darks, I'm just going to get the light on the rocks. Now, to do this sort of mark, I'm pressing a lot harder, and I'm kind of making more angular marks, because these rocks, even in the distance, they're hard. They're not swaying in the wind, in the breeze. And I want to change my mark so that you get that feeling of they're definitely rocks. There's a difference. I am blowing away the excess dust. I do normally work on an easel and the dust drops down, but we found that with these demos it's much easier to do it flat with the camera overhead. So I am getting a certain amount of dust on the surface, but I'm going to try and sort of blow that away as much as I can. And in my studio I do have an air purifier to which I have to say works wonders to keep the air a bit cleaner. So as I'm putting these lighter marks on, I'm kind of thinking about this path that I want my my viewer to take. And you might think at the moment that it's a little bit undefined, but this is the way I work. I like to be quite loose, and then to tighten up in certain areas, because I don't think that you need to put all the detail in all over. And I'm just, before I stop, I'm just going to sort of put a little bit of the blue that I used before on these rocks, because I just want to, in my head, establish that that's a bit of a shadow area as well. Okay, has anybody got any questions, Lois? Or is it too early? Or have they?
Can you just say where you put the pink?
Sorry?
Can you just say where you put the pink?
The pink, okay. So I'm just plugging my phone in if you hear a funny noise. So the pink, it wasn't really a pink. It was more of a flesh tone, to be honest. I tend to, in my head, I think of it as pink. I just put it slightly in the background up here and a little bit up here, and I'll also start to introduce a little bit into the rocks. So it's very, very subtle, and you don't have to do it at all. It's just I'm always very conscious when I'm using greens that green is just green, isn't it? And it can be very flat. And if you can put green, pinks and oranges and reds and blues and yellows into it, you'll get much more life in your greens. You can paint a whole picture in lots of different colours of green, but to me, it always needs something else to kind of lift it a bit.
Got you.
I've got another question for you. Somebody's asking, how do you choose the paper colour when using soft pastels?
Well, it depends. Unless I want to make my life really difficult and pick a contrasting colour, what I do is I get my reference, the best quality reference I can, and I lay it against different colour papers, which is all very well if you've got the papers at home, I suppose. But so when I put this against this colour, I felt like the colour was in there, and but equally there are kind of blues in there and kind of greens and browns. So this, like I said, it would work on lots of different colours. The reason I tend to stick to greys when I'm doing these demos is because I think it's easier to kind of say to people, oh, you know, get hold of a grey, and also I think what matters is that it's a kind of neutral tone. It's a mid-tone, so I can put these lights on and they really show as well as the darks. I wouldn't do this on white because I wouldn't be able to get that lovely effect of the light really quickly. So paper's like how long's a piece of string, really. But because you know, I've done woodland pictures on bright red as well, just to make my life really hard, but it was actually really good fun. So all I'd say about that is experiment. Try to get different colours. The lady who, I think it was Wendy, who contacted me about using the sandy brown colour. What I've done here is I've let a lot of the pink of the paper show through. You'd probably have to put a lot more on in these areas, and then you'll be able to let your paper show through more down here. Whereas for my darks, I'm going to have to cover the paper. I think the nice thing to do with pastel paper is to choose a colour that will be part of the palette, so you don't completely cover it all up. That's my main kind of rule of thumb for choosing. Does that help?
Yes. Someone's asking, are these soft pastels oil based?
No, they're not. They're not oil pastels at all. They're made with pure pigment, a little bit of binder, and a little bit of water to make them into a kind of dough, and then they're rolled out basically into little sausages and left to dry and then cut up. So there isn't any oil in these.
Someone's asking. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't use oil pastels.
Someone says they're using Pastel Matte 3 and Unison Pastel, but having problems blending despite applying very gently.
Okay, so with this sort of technique, with Pastel Matte, which I don't use very much because I like to be able to blend, with Pastel Matte, you can lay the colours over each other beautifully, but it's harder to smudge them. You have to put a lot of layers on to smudge them. So in that case, I'd use it in a more direct way and just don't worry about the smudging. If you want to get it to look softer, put some more of the lighter opaque colours on and that'll naturally soften it back. It's just a different way of working. It's just not such a smudgy surface.
Someone using Art Spectrum Colour Fix Primer Rose Grey. Is that used on a paper or a board?
Yeah, that's what I'm using.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But you can get Art Spectrum Colour Fix already primed. I think it's called Colour Fix paper. So it doesn't have to be one that you buy and then you paint on yourself. I don't mind keep answering questions, but I'll just say before I answer any more that I'm now going to use. I'm just using that same technique for kind of building up the darks on the rocks.
Just describe a bit more the sort of stages that you've gone through so far.
Pardon?
You started with the background and now you're sort of in the midground. Is that correct? Or
yes, it is. I've come down. What I've done is I've established my light in the distance, and now I'm coming down and I'm starting to look at the stronger shadows.
Right.
And I'm going to use 3 colours. Well, I'm going to use probably more actually because I can't stop myself. So that was the first colour I've used on the rocks. But when I look at these rocks, I want them to have a certain amount of texture to them. They are really quite dark, but they're also made up of lots of different colours. And another reason I picked this rose grey is because there's a lot of warmth in the colour of the rocks. And in my paintings over the last few years, I've tended to make them quite blue, and I'm trying to just experiment a little bit more and use some warmer colours. So I'm always trying to sort of just try different things, really.
Just so you know, your camera has moved slightly. So if you could move it more over your painting.
Okay.
Perfect. That's good. Thank you.
Don't know how that happened. I think my board's migrating.
Baden wants to know how much detail is in your book for all these tips and tricks.
There's loads of detail in my book, actually. Thank you for mentioning that. There's a lot about the techniques in my book. And then I talk a lot about drawing and then about the techniques, and then there's lots of projects where you can put them into practice. Going on to done a bit of a brown and a darker blue now on the rocks. So again, this sort of just laying it on and I'll just do a little bit of rockiness on here. So these are round rocks. They're round river rocks that have been quite eroded. So there is a kind of, well, roundness to them. There's a softness to them. But I also feel that you've got to tell the viewer that they are very rocky. And one of the ways that I think you can do that is by describing the lovely kind of cracks and joins, the little triangles you get where one rock sits over another and you get that little bit of shadow. As I come in with my darker blue now, that's the sort of thing that I'm looking at. So I'm looking at things like there's a lovely bit of a dark under that bit there, and then there's another sort of crack here, and I am using a dark blue for this, and you do need to be careful if you go very heavy with these darks, because you can already see there's quite a lot of dark now in this painting, and it's supposed to be a painting about the sunlight. So I've got to be really careful that I don't get too carried away and too heavy with it all. There's nothing like doing something a few times to get used to it, like I have been doing when I do any of my demos, because what it does is it actually gives you the ability to see where it goes wrong. So do be careful that you don't go too dark, because the thing is, you can always come back and add more dark in, which I did with my trees. I kind of stood back a bit, added a bit more, and I'm just going to put a little bit more of that blue up there in the trees. And now, as I come round here, I'm coming off and being a lot lighter with those marks, because I do want some dark again, because I want, especially this rock here, it's got a lovely bit of light water behind it when I've got onto that stage. So it needs to have a certain depth to it. But like I said before, I've just got to go a little bit gently. And another thing about the marks that I'm making, I don't know whether you're noticing, but I'm starting to ghost a little bit of the dark in under the water, and I'm doing that with horizontal lines, because even though the water's rippling, compared to this bank of rocks and the trees, it's very flat, and you can describe the let's give it a bit of a blow. You can describe the fact that something is flat by going more horizontal with your marks. Does that make sense? Do ask me more questions as you have them, but I'm going to see if
I've got no more questions at the moment.
Oh, right, okay.
People have got their heads down, busy following you.
Okay, because I want to. I know this is because this is quite complicated. I don't want to.
I asked a question.
Yes.
If you're using unison soft pastels, would it be possible for you to give the colour number?
It's a bit difficult to give. Yeah, no, I don't really have. I can't just give you the colour numbers as I do it, because I just don't have.
Okay.
I have to say they are in the book though. The colour numbers of this this set are in the book.
Right.
But
I got a large set at Christmas, but.
Okay, for most of them, yeah, I just don't remember the colour numbers, because they're all just a letter and a number, and my brain can't cope with that, I'm afraid.
So right. once you've broken them and taken the ones I got at Christmas have got a label on them, so you remove that label, do you? So
I do remove the label, but what I do is what I would advise you do is make your own little colour chart. So okay. I was testing out. This was me testing out some additional colours that I was thinking of using with this. And can you see? I took them.
Yes.
I broke one from a box and I just wrote the number down. And that is such a sensible thing to do. And I'd like to say that I do that all the time, but sadly I don't. Right. If I did, I'd be a lot more organised. But that's what people who are very sensible do.
Yeah, I did like the book, by the way.
Oh, good. But yeah, these pretty much all of these colours will be in there.
Okay. Thank you.
So now I'm just adding a little bit more of those greens to the water, because I'm now going to start concentrating on the water. I'm going to leave the rocks as they are for a bit, and now really think about the water, because I think time is advancing. Now, what we've got going on with this water is, let's look at this one. Is we've got this beautiful brown area. It's like sandy underneath the water. It's not very deep at all, and then it's got a rich brown on it. That is because the water's come off the moor and it's really peaty. So there's a kind of brown ochre area. And then there's the very dark shadow, which I'm using the blue for. Then there's shadows around here that are reflecting the greens. Again, I'm sorry, you can't really see. I'll try to show you as I do it. Are reflecting the greens from the trees above. And then there's an area here which is reflecting the brighter greens. So we've kind of got really warm and lighter, dark, dark, and then green, and then over the dark we've got this beautiful bright blue. So I've got quite a lot going on here to we've got quite a lot to get our heads around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of do one colour at a time. I'm just going to put a little bit of I'm going to drag a little bit of dark green on for a start.
Rebecca, someone's using oil pastels. Do you have any tips for her?
I don't really, because I don't use oil pastels. The only tip I have for oil pastels is if you're trying to blend them, you can use white spirit to soften the pastel. But apart from that, I don't, because I've never had any success at using them. I don't find them anywhere near as subtle as a soft pastel. But I know companies like Sennelier do huge selections of oil pastels, so there must be lots of colours to choose from. But I'm afraid I can't help you very much there.
Use pastel pencils as well as pastel.
I do use pastel pencils, and I have got a pastel pencil here. I've got a darker one that I bought that I was going to use to if I wanted to add some really fine. This is like a dark brown. If I wanted to add some really fine kind of branches over here, but I don't use them very much with my landscape work because I find that they make me tighten up. I use them a massive amount for portraits and animal work though. But yeah, I suppose if I was doing little tiny landscape sketches, I'd probably use them. But I just find that they don't have, to me, landscape, a lot of it is to do with colour, and they don't have such a kind of strong pigment, partly because they have to be held together so that they don't break easily. So that restricts the amount of pigment that can be added to them, if that makes sense. But they're actually, they are lovely as well for kind of dusting like a tint over as well. So I'll just put a few of my greens in there, and I'm now going to try and clean my hand a bit and go on to these ochre-y colours. Just having a look at what it looks like through the camera. And this is like a kind of yellow ochre, raw sienna type colour. And I'm actually, because I want this to be quite bright, because it's where the glow of the sun is, I'm using it on its end, because by using it on its end, I can put more pressure on it. I just want a little bit more kind of oomph to kind of start to contrast with these darks.
Someone's advising you, Rebecca, that baby wet wipes clean pastel hands brilliantly.
Yes, they do. They do indeed. But I've been trying to stop buying wet wipes for environmental reasons.
If you use loo roll, and
actually, I have to say,
yeah, works the same.
I've got some paper towel here that I actually wet with water earlier, so I am organised. I've just forgotten about it, so thank you. That's my equivalent of a wet wipe. It's like in the olden days, wherever we went, my mum used to take a horrible wet face cloth and attack us with it. I've become that person now. Okay, so that's that colour, and now I've got a kind of lighter version of that, like a pale kind of ochre. I think this is one of the natural, if it's not one of the natural earth colours, these sort of ochre-y colours, the person who was asking about actual colour names, Unison do this beautiful range of natural earths, which are lovely for literally this sort of thing, painting the earth, but they also work brilliantly with animal work. There's a lot of just the beautiful naturalness, whether it's kind of like I don't know, Labradors or big cats kind of thing. So that was that one. I haven't been putting them on here again. Don't know whether you can see that edge. And that was that one. I'm getting terribly, I'm actually distracting myself quite a lot today. And then I've got this richer brown, which to give me a little bit more of a kind of shadow. So it's where the it's where these kind of shallowy bits are going a little bit into shadow. And also to give it a little bit of an oomph, I've got a little bit of an orange. Now you don't necessarily need the orange, but again, it can just lift it. If you put the orange on really thickly, it's going to jump out and throttle you. But if I just kind of, because I've got about 3 or 4 layers of pastel on this now, if I just waft it around really gently, it just, if the colours I had got weren't bright enough, just bringing in one of those, I know it's not a primary, but it's got such a power to the pigment. It's another thing about, I know there's a lot of Unison fans here today, because you come from the community Facebook group, which I have to say is a marvellous place. And it's one of the things I love about Unison is those natural, it's the way you have to get used to some of the differences in the pigments. So those natural earth colours were actually very, almost transparent, some of them. They're quite soft, gentle pigments, but the reds and the oranges, whew, you know, they really do pack a punch. So it's always a good idea to just kind of practice a bit with your colours rather than launching into an actual picture with them. Just have a little bit of a kind of play around with how they behave. Even if you just do little kind of samples of blending colours together like this, it's amazing how much you can kind of get to know with them. Right, I need to get a little bit of my just going to focus a little bit now, because I just need to get a little bit of a little bit more dark in before I can put my lights in now. And I'm just going to put a little bit more of I'm going to tighten before I put my lights in my water, because I know at the moment it's looking really not very exciting down here, because it's very much a kind of underlayer, and I just want to give these rocks a little bit more of a tighten them up is what I think of it as doing. So I just want to clarify some of my edges. Because what I want again is I want to tell us the difference between the rocks and the water around them. So I'm just going to come in with a bit more of my dark again. And I'm just, so I'm kind of doing the curve of the rock, but I'm making sure that they sit on a straight line. Because of course that straight line is what tells us that it's the water, isn't it? So now I'm going to just very gently in some areas use my scraper, which is just a bit of like a bit of plastic with a sharp edge, with a straight edge that I've cut with a blade. And you can make these yourself at home. Apparently milk cartons are great. I also use like packaging if I've had paintbrushes come in them. Because now I want to start doing, I've got my kind of base of my colours on my water, but I need to get something nice going now with my rippliness. Okay, has anybody got any other questions?
No one's
Yeah.
asked anything specific.
Okay.
Would a credit card be too harsh for that?
I don't know. Credit cards. I get asked this a lot. Credit cards are they're getting thinner, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh,
They
I
may
see.
well. In the old days, credit cards were a bit too thick, but they'd certainly be better than nothing.
Okay, thanks.
So what I'm coming in with now is the colour blue that I used above in the sky, the sort of mid blue and then the next blue down. And what I'm doing is I'm looking very closely at my reference as I do this, so that I'm looking at the flow. This is all about flow now. It's about curves and kind of, well, like I'm doing with my finger, there's a kind of motion like this. So there's a little bit of a diagonal across here. This is quite shiny and reflecting the sky above here. Suddenly we get into shadow and there's a little kind of step down, and then it sort of flows in curves away from there. So what I've done, I don't know if you can see, is I've put that little bit of the line in as a kind of guide for myself. And I know that the blue's quite, we've got some sort of slightly diagonally marks as it comes down. And then I'm doing, let me get my piece of mark making bit of paper. I'm sort of doing lots of, that's not going to show up. Let me just do that with a darker colour. I'm doing lots of sort of dibbly dancing, dancing type of marks now. Sometimes with a pastel on its edge, sometimes with it on its end. But try to be really light with these marks because you can build them up gradually. And just think about that water flowing towards you. And I'm thinking about it sort of as it comes around. I'm pressing harder here because there's a brighter area here as it reflects the sky down here. And the thing about reflections is you just got to look at what's above it, because believe me, it really does matter a lot that you put your reflections under the right bit of colour. And there's a sort of little bit that comes down here as well. Just checking what that looks like over here. And then I'm going to come in with a lighter light. And I'm also, again, using the colour of the paper underneath because that light pink is quite nice under the it's quite nice under these lighter areas. And here there's that little bit of light that the reflection in the water under these rocks. So I'm reaching for my cream. Don't know whether you can see, that's a much brighter mark. And I'm going to do some horizontal lines that come away from that rock. So I've got a dark bit of rock and a very light light against it. And what that does is it draws the eye in. Having a light light against a dark dark, it's a good trick to direct the person's view. This viewer that I keep talking about, that I always have in my head, the mythical viewer. It's a bit like the mystery shopper. I imagine somebody's looking at my picture and I'm having to describe what's going on to them. And then I'm dragging again, I'm dragging that green over the darker green. And by not putting much pressure on, you kind of slightly pick up the you slightly pick up the surface of the paper. And if you've got too much pastel, a bit of troubleshooting here, if you've got too much pastel on your surface, for this to work very well, it's very good to try the method of taking some of it off. Now, I don't know whether that does work on things like pastel mat. I don't think it would work on a velour paper. These are papers that I don't tend to use because I need my, I know I need my ability to be able to kind of work over lights over darks. The other reason that you may not get a nice light over a dark is if you haven't got a really good quality pastel. So all the people out there using Unison or Sommelier or the professional pastel brands will find that they can do lovely things with lights and darks. But if you're using kind of cheaper pastels, you probably find that you don't get that beautiful kind of contrast happening. So as I've got my the ripples coming around some of the rocks, I'm just giving it a little bit of a wiggle because I'm imagining it. I know as this water rushes past, it's sort of you get that lovely bit of shimmering light as it goes past the rock. The other thing I do with the rocks is that I put that dark underneath, but I then drag a little bit of this light over it. Just a little bit of a line underneath can kind of just tell you that it's sitting on water. And then I also, the reason I got the turquoise was because I wanted just a little bit of a zhuzh of extra colour. And I haven't got the colour of blue that's in, well, I haven't got it in this set, I've got it somewhere, but I wanted to kind of stick to a certain set of colours. So for some reason I picked another colour I hadn't got anyway, which was turquoise, because I think there's something lovely about what you can do with the turquoise. It just kind of lifts it a little bit, and it's actually nice as well to put it in these as for some of the shadow colour in the rocks at the back, and also can actually add a little bit to it up here, because if I've got it in the water, it makes sense for it to be in some of the colours behind as well, if that makes sense. Just gonna, having put that in, I now want to make it a bit darker again. Just trying to find my green. And the rippling effect down here, just put a little bit more of that in. But the amount of rippling that you do down here is kind of, you know, you could do loads, or you could not do very much at all if you wanted to, because what there is on the photo that I can see is there's all those sort of mossy bits underneath, and there's sort of layers of things going on underneath, as well as the rippling of the water on top. So what I'd kind of advise for these areas is just sort of have a little play as you're doing it. And like I said, there's no reason, I mean, you might not want to do it again, but it's actually, it's a great thing to have a go at doing, a painting more than once, because you find that you can get into different areas of it as you work on, as you work on it again. Because of all the ones I've done, the sort of few I've done of this, on some of them I really like the water, and on others I really like the trees, and there isn't one when I actually like everything on all of them. But as I've done each one, I've kind of learned a bit more about painting trees, or enjoyed painting the water more, or do you know what I mean? It's like a constant, it's just a learning experience, isn't it, really? And now I've got to the point with it where I just need to kind of, I'm going to stand back a bit, and I don't know whether anybody's got any other questions, because I've been working on it for kind of nearly an hour now, and I get to the point when I need to stand back and kind of just look at the way the balance is working, really. Because again, as I said, each time I've done it, it's kind of behaved in a different way. Just have a look. I'm just going to put some more. This is that lovely cream colour. And I can just drag some little lines to that to give it a little bit more of a zhuzh. So has anybody got any other questions as I keep tweaking?
I think there's somebody who thinks that you're working awfully fast, but I don't know how you can slow it down, really.
Well, it's a kind of, is it too fast for people to be keeping up? Because it's why I say it's a really good idea to kind of watch it and then
yeah, I mean, it's a very good idea to rewatch afterwards, actually, I think, and then you can start in your own time.
It's what I always say in the blurb, because I do work quite quickly. I think it's good to kind of watch and absorb what you're doing, and then what I'm doing, and then have a go yourself.
I've got a couple of questions here. How do you know when to stop working on a picture?
I wish I knew that. I think I know when to stand back. I usually don't work for more than an hour on anything, because I don't think you can tell at the time whether you need to stop or not. So I think we get very close to what we're doing, and we literally can't see the wood for the trees. And we do what I'm actually starting to do now, which is just kind of fiddle around. So I think you should always stop, move away, go and make a cup of tea, and probably come back another day, which obviously I can't do here. But
someone's asking, when the painting's finished, do you leave the edges clear in amount? And do you have one you can pop around it to see how it looks, so we can see how it looks?
I haven't got one to pop around it, I'm afraid. When you mean leave the edges clear, do you mean these edges?
Yes.
Well, you could do it. You could do either. I actually quite like having that kind of edge that you then discover it. I feel as though it's like it's emerged from the paper, and I think it's really nice to see that, because it's definitely a piece of art rather than something that looks a bit like a photograph. But actually, I don't tend to leave them showing very much. But actually, I wish I did, if that makes sense. I think I probably would do if it was something that I'd done a sketch outside, because I think the speed I'm working to do this today to show you, so that you don't all fall asleep, is the speed that I would work if I was doing something outside, because I actually get very impatient if I'm working out in the landscape, because I always get too cold or too hot, or not comfortable.
She's asking whether you work flat or upright, but I think she missed the beginning. Could you just say a bit more about that?
I am working flat, but I would recommend, if you're working at home, to work upright, if you can, because then the dust will drop down. I think it's always good to work upright with pastels for two reasons. Firstly, so that you can stand back and look at what you've done, but also for the dust dropping down, because you're much more likely to kind of stand back from it if it's on an easel, and you the best thing to do is to leave the room, come back, I work in my studio, and I spend an awful lot of time going out of the room to make a drink, wash my hands, have a chat with somebody, and then I always come back and think, crikey, what was I thinking? And that's really useful.
Do you fix the picture once completed?
No, I don't fix the picture, but I mount it in a double mount with a mount hidden behind, so that the dust what I always do, or I shouldn't really do it here because I'm on somebody else's space. I don't know whether you can see this. I'm picking the board up. I've got a rug on the floor. I don't know whether you heard that. That was me hitting it on the floor. Oh God, there's probably somebody in the office below. Never mind. I keep forgetting I'm not at home. I'm in this really clean office space, and it's actually very exciting being in it.
You've made a mess. I've put
my own rug on the floor, but I keep forgetting that, I walk around with these filthy hands and everything's beautiful and shiny, and I come in thinking, oh, what a lovely world, and I go out thinking, God, they'll never let me come again. Yes, anyway, where was I? So I do that. I tap it so that the excess comes off. And then sometimes I put a clean piece of paper over it and roll it, which is a good way of pushing the pastel into the surface. And then I do that thing where it has a mount behind a mount. So if that's the mount that you see, there's one hidden behind, and then you get a little bit of a they call it a pastel trap, I think, that the dust, if dust does come down onto the mount, it goes behind, hopefully. Yeah, so I do 3 things rather than fixing, because I haven't found a fixative that doesn't seem to alter it. It doesn't seem to kind of alter the tonal values that I've worked so hard to achieve. And sometimes it really changes the colours. So yeah, any other questions? Because I know I'm just fiddling around now.
Yeah. None here. They'd like to add?
I think it's stunning.
Oh, it's finished. Did you say?
No, I think it's stunning, and I can't wait to have a go.
Oh well, that's very kind of you, because I can't tell anymore.
I think it's lovely.
Thank you. Well, what I am trying to do is I'm sort of answering your questions. Is I'm just looking at things like that bit there. Actually, has just made me very happy. Did you see? I put the colour that was in the tree there. I've just slipped a little bit of it in there, just really gently. It's just a tiny little hint, but actually, I quite like the way that it's making those trees make a bit more sense. Because like I said before, what I don't like when I'm doing a picture is if it looks like a jigsaw. If I've got like green here and blue here and light blue here, and I know there are artists who work deliberately in that way, but I think everything in one picture is all part of the same family. All the colours should work together. So I want to make sure that colours I've got down here are in other places. So, if I was going to fiddle around with this more, I'd probably put some of this ochre colour, because that would look really nice on some of the tree trunks. Sorry?
It would look like lichen.
Yes, it would, which of course they're always covered in lichen. And also I could put some of that, I'd quite like to lighten this area here. From that is the area that's catching the sun, and I could just put a little bit of the pink that I used up here, the skin tone. I could just put a little bit of that in it. And these little sort of tweaky bits, I find the best way to do these is to have it on an easel, to do a little bit, to do like literally a couple of marks like that, and then go back again. And when I say stand back, I mean like 6 feet at least. Well, yes, socially distance yourself from your painting. That's how far back you need to go to be able to look at it. The other thing is if you can't go back very far, is to screw your eyes up and look at it, so that you're sort of seeing it. Because as I screw my eyes up and look at this, I'm thinking, oh, it's a bit boring down here. It could do with being a bit darker. Because I do love a bit of drama.
Someone's asking, is the elastoplast on your finger deliberate to help with the painting, or are you covering a cut?
No, it's on there because I wore the end off my finger yesterday.
Oh, yes, you did say.
It's actually is rather useful, especially in the early stages, because this bit here, you can blend, but I don't know whether you can see what happens is it takes quite a lot off. So, which I know there are people who brush into their dry pastel when they put on it, but I just find it takes too much off when I do that, so I end up putting it back on again. But yeah, so I'm just going to have to fiddle forever and ever. I know that when I do stand back, when I get this home, one of the things I won't have got, I'm going to take the one off here that I did earlier. Hopefully I haven't jiggled the, this is one I did earlier. And what I've got on this one that's working, this one I don't like the trees so much because they've all gone a bit kind of dark and heavy. But what I do like is the fact that my ripples, I've gone a bit darker around here, but I feel as though there's more of a kind of flow. Do you see what I mean? There's more of a sort of slight diagonal as it goes around the corner, which I'm not quite getting in the other one. And with this one, I've got another one here to show you. With this one, I mean the water is okay, but I quite like the fact with the trees. I don't know whether you can see that it's much more muted in the background, and then there's the brightness in this section here, which actually gives it more depth as it goes back there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think it's actually really interesting how doing the same thing over again, things gradually slightly change, but there isn't a right and a wrong about what the water should look like really, because if you think about it, every changing few seconds that water is going to look different. Every time the sun changes position, it's going to look different. So it's why it's really good to actually sketch from life, because you kind of you see changes. Got so many pictures now. Yeah, that one's got, it's interesting, isn't it? That one's got a lot more water there, and that one's got more kind of ripples, and it's also got more of a kind of gradual as it comes around the rocks, but they're all kind of quite similar in a way, I suppose. Let me just show you, for those of you who asked about in my book. Okay, so I know some of you, lots of you have got this already, but yeah, the pastel set's in there and the description about pastels. So it starts off with basic kind of drawing, just with charcoal and pastels, because I think pastels, if you work in pastels, it's really good to have some good drawing skills. And then I go on to the separate techniques, which is what I've been looking at. But there's little kind of exercises to get used to them, and then a little bit about getting the distance into landscapes. And then lots of different landscape kind of projects, sort of easier things to do, like anything from waves, water. Oh, that was, if I can find that again, those are some of the sketches that I did of this bit of the river, the water coming around the stones. And there's skies and trees, and there's section on drawing people, and then it goes into portraits and animals. So there's lots to do in that. In a kind of simpler way than just having a go at a picture like this.
Can you talk a bit about sketching from photos?
Yes. If I sketch from photos, I find that oh God, I've just gone a bit carried away with my green here, haven't I? I'll just say this, Lois, and then I'll talk about sketching from photos. This is a really good example of why I love pastels. I don't love the fact that I've just done that green and it was too dark because I wasn't concentrating. But what I can do now is I can really knock that back and soften it back into the distance. So by using the colours that I used up here, I can gradually just kind of soften it back a little bit. And if I really want to sort of neutralize it, I can get a bit of the pink out, because of course the sort of reds in the pink are opposite the green, and then it's gradually gets knocked back again. And I'm just going to scrape the edge of it and then put the edge of the the rocking again against it. And I've actually made the rock now go very kind of solid, but I can just add a little bit to that. So I think that whoever it was that asked about when things are finished, it's really difficult, isn't it, with pastels, because you can keep doing that, you can keep changing it. I think it's finished when somebody comes up to you and says, step away from the easel. Or to be more serious, is when I feel like I can't do anything anymore. I think that's the point, to move away. Don't keep thinking I can make it better. Just step away. So working from photos, I think what often happens with photos is that you get several things. You get the darks become too dark. So say with this one, it's actually it's looking darker than it is in reality on this. So I very often will do what I did with the other one and adjust it in. I use Photoshop, but there's probably loads of things. Most of the photos I take these days, I take on my phone, and there's loads of little gadgety bits, you know, apps you can use, or even I mean, I've got an iPhone. There's loads of ways I can change it on this. So I end up always using more than one photo. I think you have to bear in mind that the colours that you get from your phone may not be right. My previous one made everything go really blue. So I then had to adjust it to put more yellow into it to make everything warmer. So if you do have the time and the wherewithal to ever sketch when you're out, I don't mean that you have to sit down and do something for an hour. Even if you, when I go out sketching, I very often just take one of these sets with me, obviously not looking as beautiful as that, and just try to do some little colour sketches, because I personally don't have a very good memory for colour, and I need something to help me interpret this photograph. Because the other thing the photograph doesn't show you is what it felt like to be there. And there's nothing like sitting down, even for 5 minutes, and doing a little sketch to implant a stronger memory into your head of what it actually felt to be there. The other thing is, I suppose, don't be a slave to the photograph. You know, change the composition if you want to, unless it's a commission of somebody's garden or view or whatever. Make changes. Treat it as a starting point. You see, I love this one, your beautiful bit of river, Lois, and I'd like to do a piece of this where it just takes that a little bit further round.
Yeah.
So just sort of add a bit onto it. So find what you really love about the photo, make that your focal point, and then just work with it. But I'll often do a painting with like a handful like this. They're not really a handful anymore. I usually have them on my iPad, but it takes more than one.
And do you deliberately simplify when you're working from a photo?
I do simplify, because the world's just too complicated, isn't it? I could have made this easier by actually putting fewer rocks in. Not less, it's fewer, isn't it? Because I don't think we need everything. When we're there, it's another thing about sketching. When you're sketching on the spot, you actually only draw what it matters to you. Whereas when we get home and we've got that photo, we almost feel like we have to put as much in as possible. And that's really not true. You still only have to put in what's important, if that makes sense. I hope that helps a bit.
It does. Someone's saying, if they can't afford Unison pastels, what would be a good alternative?
Oh, I don't know. I'd probably buy a smaller number of Unison. I honestly, I'm not trying to market Unison. I just love them to bits. I think Rembrandt. I know artists who use Rembrandt pastels and do nice things with them. They're just a bit too hard for me. But they're a kind of they are still. I think they say they're a professional one. The only thing I wonder about, and I hope somebody can correct me on this, Rembrandt pastels, is I'm not sure how light fast they are, because I think Unison guarantee that they are, whereas or some of those sort of companies like Sennelier or Unison do. I don't know how light fast a Rembrandt would be if you stick it in a sort of light room. But I know there are a lot of artists, professional artists, who really like Rembrandts because they're a little bit sharper a little bit harder than Unison, so you can actually get sharper marks. I wouldn't buy a really cheap pastel. I'd always go for a smaller amount of what you can afford, and ask them for Christmas presents and birthday presents. And if somebody can't afford to buy you a whole box of them, ask for I don't know, a voucher or something. That's how I know a lot of people have built up their collections. Because with art materials, I just think you get what you pay for, which I know is sad but true. That's why my only holidays are coming to see Lois in Italy, because I've spent all my money on pastels. But at least I'll have lots of pastels to bring with me. Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, holiday. Well, Nell keeps telling me that I need to understand what the word holiday means, because
work.
Yes, I seem to have missed the concept, because I can't just do a holiday because I find them really boring.
Yeah.
But yeah, has anybody, rather than hearing my psychological issues, has anybody got any more art questions?
I can just hear your children saying, "I'm not going on holiday with you, Mum. It's not a holiday."
Well, nobody ever wants
many things.
Nobody ever wants to go for a walk with me, because I walk incredibly fast, but I stop abruptly every kind of 30 seconds to take photographs or to just sit down and draw. And apparently this is very annoying, I'm told.
I have a question.
Yes.
Rebecca, I find that I'm using a watercolor paper,
Yeah.
but I'm finding that the pastel is not sticking to the paper.
Right.
Is it because I've got cheap ones?
Okay, because I mean, I don't really work on watercolor paper, so I can't comment.
No,
I know
I'm sorry, it's pastel paper.
it's pastel paper. What kind of paper?
It's
Okay, it probably doesn't matter.
Canson.
Okay, it's Canson Metal, is it?
Cotton content, dual surface, pulp dyed.
Okay, but did you say you were using cheap pastels?
I don't know. I don't know if they're cheap or not. It's just I'm wondering because they're not covering very well.
Okay, if they're not covering very well, it might be because if they're coming off with a lot of dust.
Yeah.
It might be because they're not a very good quality one. But so I'm just doing a little bit on here to show you. If this is just cheap sugar paper, so the pastel doesn't take very well on this. But okay. If I want to cover to do like a soft area, I have to put more than one layer on. In fact, I have to put 2 or 3 layers on to get that softness, because if I put just one layer on and smudge it, I still get the texture of the paper. Mm-hmm. So it may be...
I'm getting the texture with several layers on.
Oh, are you? Well, yeah. The other thing...
As soon as I shake the dust off, nothing is solid anymore.
Okay, it might be to do with the pastels that you're using then. The other thing that I'd say if you're using a paper is there's always one side that's more textured than the other. And I always find it's easier to work on the less textured side. Okay. And often when you buy a pad, I'm sorry, I'm just doing this to test how hot my phone is. I'm just going to unplug it for a minute because it gets a bit overheated.
Mine says dual surface pulp dyed.
Yeah, but what I'd do is I'd use the less textured side if you're going to have a go again, because often with papers you just get that so much texture showing through, and often I don't really want that texture to be part of my work.
Well, this is it. My darks are not as dark as yours because they're not solid. I can't get them solid.
Yeah. So just try working on the other side, or it might, like I said, it might just be to do with the quality of your pastels, which okay. Is that it? Is everybody gone now?
No, I'm still here.
It's just me and you.
No. There are 88 other people still online.
Oh, right, okay.
Rebecca, going back to the Colour Fix primer, are you painting the rose grey onto another paper, or are you buying it
I painted it onto, for this one I painted it onto mount card, but I've also got I've also got Colourfix card or paper, whatever it's called.
I've got the card. I only recently learned that you could buy the paint form of it, and I just wondered which you did, and if when you're using it, what you paint it onto. That was all.
Okay, I paint it onto mount card, which I think if you're in America you call matte card, I use mount card because it's rigid enough to take it, and it's light enough to be able to put in a frame, and it doesn't cause issues. However, I know some people who paint it like Nell paints it onto hardboard because she puts it on so thickly that it makes the mount card warp. The reason I tend to buy it in the pots to paint on, which is a bit of a kind of outlay financially, but once you've bought 2 or 3 pots, they last for a long time. But it means that I can mix them and do I can do sort of painted under paintings basically, or I can tint it. You know, I could have mixed a bit of white in this and made it a lighter shade of rose grey.
Because I do like that paper. I use that paper a lot, but I haven't really gone to those sort of paler grey pinky tones. That looks like a really nice base colour.
Yeah, it is. I only discovered it last year, and it does make me happy. And also I was working on colours that were a bit darker, but for these Zoom demos, if you work on a very dark colour, the phone camera can't cope with the sudden changes. So it's got a lovely kind of warmth to it, hasn't it?
It has, yeah.
But of course, with the Colourfix primers, you can tint them with acrylic or with water-based inks.
That's
so you can mix them with loads of water-based products. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah. They're very versatile. And also, I was going to say, I sound like I'm doing a sales pitch for Colourfix now, but you can add water to it. You can wash over an area with water, which I often do with my landscapes. If there's a bit I don't like, I'll wash into it with water, and that then gets very exciting because it looks like paint, but then it tends to dry back very flat. Yeah. But the advantage of it when it's dried back is that it's fixed so that you can go over it.
Yeah, I have heard of that before. Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. Very enjoyable.
Pleasure. I'm just cleaning my pastels while I'm answering these questions.
Someone's asking whether you use sandpaper at all.
I don't use sandpaper because I like to smudge and soften, and with sandpaper, I find with sandpaper you have to be a little bit more. You kind of can only put it on and leave it on, can't you? But I know that the advantage of the sandpapers is that you can get that fantastic vibrancy of pigment, because essentially all the little granules of pastel get caught in with the sand and they reflect in on each other. So you actually get a much more luminous glow to your colours, which is very beautiful. Nell uses them a lot on her flower. She uses that surface on her landscapes and her flower paintings. But of course, the downside of that is that you use your pastels up even quicker because you basically sand them down.
Yeah.
Whereas I find that the Colourfix primer is like a very, it's almost like wet and dry sandpaper. It's not as coarse. And you have the advantage that you can put water on it, which I think with Sennelier Sand Card, you can't put water on it. Takes the surface off.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
Can you put hairspray on it to fix it?
You can put hairspray on, but I wouldn't recommend it because we don't know what the hairspray is going to do to it.
Okay.
If you're using, I mean, it's okay if you're using, if you're just doing quick charcoal sketches or you're doing sketches that you're not going to sell. I'm just thinking if you're going to sell it or put it in the Royal Academy, I wouldn't use hairspray because you don't know what's going to happen over the kind of years with it.
No, I better not then.
Yeah, because the Royal Academy might not be happy with your. Yeah.
Thank you.
Turn up with it.
Very enjoyable. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. That was great.
Yes.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Oh, very nice. Yeah.
Really enjoyed it. Love working quickly, Rebecca. It's really inspiring.
if you kept up with me, then hats off to you.
Well, it's good to work quickly, I think. I think it's great. So thank you.
Oh yeah, it's a pleasure. It is actually really good for us to work quickly, I think. It's kind of, it energizes us, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's something that's actually quite difficult to do when you're on your own. I think
yes, and it suits the subject, you know, the water, the light, it's really good.
Yeah.
Feel it moving.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for coming.